Assalamu alaikum to our listeners and welcome to the Living History section of the special Jalsa Salana program. My name is Dr. Mohammed Iqbal and I'm the producer and host of the Living History series of programs on Voice of Islam. On this wonderful day in Adiqatul Mahdi, I'm joined by my colleagues Abdul Qayyum Rashid Saab, Assalamu alaikum, Qayyum Saab, and also Sheikh Rahman Saab, who is our special guest. And inshallah, after the news hour, we'll be joined by Munir Rafiq to talk about the history of Jalsa Salana. Now, listeners and our non-Ahmadi guests may or may not know the Ahmadi Muslim, certainly our Ahmadis will know, but the Ahmadi Muslim community was founded in 1889 by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who took the Pledge of Allegiance, or Bai'at as we call it, from those who were his closest companions. In 1891, he went on to declare that he was the promised Messiah and Mahdi alayhi salam. And in that same year, he decided to hold the first annual gathering, which we call the Jalsa Salana. Now, during this historic Jalsa in Qadian, which was the city in the Punjab of India at that time, the promised Messiah and Mahdi wrote a book called Asmani Faisla, which in English means the Heavenly Decree. And it was read out by Hazrat Maulvi Abdul Karim Sialkoti Razillah anhu, in front of 75 fortunate members who were present. The names of all these 75 attendees were included at the end of the Heavenly Decree book so that future generations may remember them, and today certainly we remember them. Qayyum Saab, this was clearly a historic event, and tell us a little bit more about the foundations of the Jalsa by the Promised Messiah and Mahdi al-Islam.
Well, the Promised Messiah, on whom be peace, also published an announcement informing members of his community, or Jamaat, about the decision of this historical annual gathering, which took place on 27th, 28th and 29th of December in Qadian. And in fact, even now, it is still held on 27th, 28th and 29th of December in Qadian in India. The Promised Messiah, on whom be peace, speaking on the purpose of this gathering, wrote, "All sincere souls have entered the fold of this humble one should know that the purpose of pledging allegiance is to dampen the worldly ardor, so that the heart is engulfed in the love of bountiful God and of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him." He added, "Bai'at, which is the allegiance, is devoid of all blessings and is a mere formality if one does not care to meet me. Since, due to physical disability, lack of resources, and long distances, it is not possible for everyone to stay in my company or to visit me a few times every year, and most hearts are not yet endowed with such ardent desire that they should bear the greatest troubles and hardships for the meeting. It seems appropriate, therefore, that 3 days of every year should be fixed for a gathering in which all my devoted followers should, God willing, be present with the condition of health, time, and absence of strong impediments. So in my opinion, these dates should be from 27th to the 29th of December. Hence, from this day, 30th of December 1891, if we live to see 27th of December, all our friends should do the best of their ability, come and listen to divine words and join us in the supplication for the sake of Allah." This is from pages 73 and 74 in the book mentioned by Dr. Saab, the Heavenly Decree. He added, "This gathering will be devoted to the expansion of such truths and spiritual insights as are necessary for the promotion of faith and certainty and spiritual understanding, and there will be special prayers and attention for the participants. And to the best of our ability, we shall endeavor to supplicate at the threshold of the Most Merciful that He may draw them towards Him, may accept them, and may bring about a pious change in them. An additional benefit of these gatherings will be that each year new entrants to the community shall, or the Jamaat shall, by being present on the fixed dates, get to know their brethren who had joined earlier. And these meetings will be led to progressive strengthening of the bond of mutual love and affection. Prayers for absolution will be offered for brothers who will have passed away in the interim, and supplication shall be made at the threshold of the glorious God, that He may unite all these brothers in spirit and banish all estrangement, dryness, and differences from amongst them."
I mean, this really sets the scene and the foundations that the Promised Messiah Mahdi alayhi salam. This Jalsa was held after the Zohar prayers as well. And it was a very special occasion for those who attended. In preparation for the next year in 1892, the Promised Messiah, Mahdi alayhi salam, produced a pamphlet or ishtihar on the 7th of December 1892 explaining the purpose of Jalsa. And again, I'll quote from this ishtihar. The primary purpose of this convention is to enable every sincere individual to personally experience religious benefits. They may enhance their knowledge, and due to their being blessed and enabled by Allah, the Exalted, their perception of Allah may progress. Among its secondary benefits is that this congregational meeting together will promote mutual introduction among all brothers, and it will strengthen the fraternal ties within this community. He went on to write in this pamphlet, it is essential for all those who can afford to undertake the journey that they must come to attend this convention, which embodies many blessed objectives. They should disregard minor inconveniences in the cause of Allah and His Prophet, peace be upon him. Allah yields reward to the sincere persons at every step of their way, and no labor and hardship undertaken in His way ever goes waste. I re-emphasize that you must not rank this convention in the same league as other ordinary human assemblies. This is a phenomenon that is based purely on the divine help from the propagation of Islam. And the Promised Messiah concluded with the prayer, and this is important for us all who are listening today so many years later on. I conclude with the prayer that everyone who travels for, in brackets, attending this convention, that is for the sake of Allah. May Allah the Exalted be with him, reward him in abundant measure, have mercy on him, ease up for him his circumstances of hardship and anxiety, and eliminate his anguish and grief. May He grant him freedom from every single hardship and lay open for him the ways of achieving his cherished goals, and raise him up on the day of judgment among those of His servants who are the recipients of His blessings and mercy. May He be their guardian on their absence until after the journey comes to an end. O Allah, O Sublime One and Bestower of bounties, the ever merciful and one who resolves all problems, do grant all these prayers and grant us victory over our opponents with scintillating signs, because you have done all the powers. You have all the powers and power. Ameen. So this really shows the blessings attached with the Jalsa Salana. And Qadian became a central focal point for all the Ahmadis, obviously, who were joining in membership and taking the Bayt. And over the years, the numbers increased. And by the time the Promised Messiah, Mahdi alayhi salam, passed away in 1908, the numbers attending in 1907, the year before he passed away, had increased to 2,000. So the last Jalsa in Qadian before partition of India took place in 1946 and saw a crowd of nearly 40,000 faithful, which is approaching similar to the numbers we are getting now in the UK, which is fascinating. The Qadian Jalsa still remains central to much of the community, even now, although with the movement of Khilafat and most of the Ahmadis to Pakistan in 1947, the International Jalsa Salana moved to Pakistan. So after the partition of India on the 16th of December 1947, Hazrat Muslim Maud, the second Caliph and spiritual head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, announced during the Friday sermon that just as Jalsa Qadian would continue as normal or Zilli Jalsa, meaning in reflection of the original, would be held in Lahore on 27th and 28th of December 1947, which was to be preceded by the Shura on the 26th of December. Thereafter, in 1948, the community found a tract of arid land there upon which we call Rabwa, our beloved town where the headquarters shifted, where International Jalsa Salana began to be held, and the community, with attendance growing rapidly, reaching a stunning 250,000 at the last Jalsa, and we'll go into why that became the last Jalsa in 1983 with Sheikh Sab, our guest as well. So Qayyum Sab, truly an amazing really growth in Jalsa Salana and its importance to the Ahmadiyya community members.
Without a doubt. I mean, I think the first Jalsa was 75 people. Growing it to 250,000. But as the mission of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community was to spread the message of the promised Messiah and Mahdi on whom be peace throughout the world, this meant that communities were quickly established throughout the world, and as numbers grew, they started to hold their own annual gatherings, or Jalsa Salana. Jalsa means a gathering, and Salana is an annual event, hence an annual gathering with direct permission from the Khilafat, the Caliphate, or the head of the Ahmadi Muslim community at the time. The first annual gathering in the United Kingdom took place in the grounds of London Mosque on 29th and 30th of August 1964, in which there was a historic address given by Sir Muhammad Zafarullah Khan Sahib. There is, however, mention of an annual Jamaat conference of the United Kingdom in October 1949, where members of the community attended from around the United Kingdom. In it, the then Imam of the Fazl Mosque, London, Mushtaq Ahmad Bajwa Sahib, also invited missionaries serving in many European countries to attend this conference. While this conference was an historic event in the history of Ahmadiyyat in the United Kingdom, it is not certain whether the conference could be considered as the first annual gathering in the United Kingdom, since it was merely reported as a conference in Al-Fazl in November 1949. Also, it is not reported to have been annually held thereafter. However, the Jalsa Salana, or the annual gathering of 29th and 30th of August 1964, is reported in Al-Fazl as the first annual gathering of United Kingdom, as published in Al-Fazl on the 26th of September 1964.
I think Sheikh Saab is one of our distinguished guests and Ahmadi members from the UK community. He just corrected me with Independence Day, August, 14th of August, of course, which we mark in 1947. That's very, very important. And, for myself, I came to the UK in 1967, and I think you were born in the...
3 years later. I'm old, but I'm not that old.
3 years later. So when we, obviously, a lot of this program is going to be talking about Jalsa Salana in the UK, really, and our historical memories. But Sheikh Saab, you obviously have better memories than we have, and in Pakistan, you will recall some of the early Jalsas. As I say, what did I say, 46, 47, and in Rabwa it was held as well, and it built up. What's your memories of the Jalsas in Pakistan, and when did you come over to the UK?
I came to the UK in 1973.
Right.
But obviously Jalsas held prior to that were really a reflection of the continuation of the Jalsas in Qadian and the tradition, which of course we still carry on in the United Kingdom. When I remember that when Hazrat Khalifatul Masih IV came to the UK, he said that we must continue to carry on the tradition of the Jamaat as we've done in the past.
Did you go to the Jalsas in Pakistan?
I did, yes, to Rabwa.
When do you recall when you went to, how old you were perhaps? Because I never went to a Jalsa in Pakistan, unfortunately, so I have no memories, and people tell me about how wonderful, how organized the community was.
For example, I remember the one that I attended in 1971, which was also the election year in the country, then when Bhutto basically was, elected as our Prime Minister.
How old were you then, roughly?
20 years old.
Oh, mashallah. So, just tell us a little bit, because many of us were born in the UK, and I left Pakistan in 67 as a 9-year or 10-year-old kid, never saw it. Just tell us a little bit about, paint a picture of...
Rabwa, of course, as I recall, when, way back, was still a small town, of course, brimming with activity, because it was the center of was the center of the Jamaat until Hazrat Khalifatul Masih IV migrated to the United Kingdom. So therefore, you still had the whole town. It took a different shape, and some of that is reflected here. When you gather here for 3 days, you get a bit of that reflection as well. Of course, in a much more greener environment, but dust and everything else. But the spirit of the people, unbelievable. And some of the speeches that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih II was making for hours and hours, and people were sitting on this haystack and December gets very cold. Okay, December, of course, as you realize, gets very, very cold in the Punjab.
Because the dates were fixed as well.
Yes, the 26th, 27th, 28th were fixed.
So same in Pakistan
Absolutely, it continued. The tradition continues.
Right.
And then the people with, they wrap those blankets around themselves, and there was pin drop silence when Hazrat Khalifatul Masih II was speaking.
Some of them were for 3-4 hours plus.
Yes,
I hear
yes,
the speeches.
yes. And Hazrat Sahib, if people moved, if someone went and left in something, he felt a little annoyed, and he expressed it in his speeches that, you should. And I tell you, the spirit, you could feel the aura, of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih II. It was
because I remember from our village, even in Kashmir, people used to go to this. I was too young, but all I knew is they were going to a thing called Jalsa, etc.
They came from everywhere in Pakistan, every nick and corner of the country. People came there to attend the Jalsa, and of course some from outside of Pakistan as well, like Europe, Africa, whatever, the United States, and all that. So they came for the Jalsa as well.
And how did they sort out accommodation for these vast numbers?
Amazing. I mean, the guest houses, people actually put people up in their own houses, which was really the spirit.
It was the norm.
It was the norm. And then the food and the naans that were prepared in the tandoor and all that. And these were non-Ahmadis who were employed to make the naans and things, which was amazing.
No, I also get told about how they arrange for the rotis, the different sections. So just tell us a little bit about that before we go into our break.
Well, the rotis were, these naan. I think they're called naan bhais or something.
Because they didn't have the roti machinery.
No. This was all tandoors.
That's right. Men were the machines.
Yeah,
literally.
The men and the tandoor.
That's right.
Tandoor, which is basically a clay oven.
Yeah.
Yes, which was in the ground.
Because that's quite amazing. Because now we have this, and we're going to discuss that, the roti plant, where they just it's like escalated.
Correct.
Listen, let's go for a break now, and then inshallah we're going to carry on this fascinating discussion. So we were talking about the foundations of Jalsa Salana. We talked about the origins in Qadian, and then moving on to Pakistan. And Sheikh Saab was giving us a really interesting. Sheikh Rahman was giving us a very interesting insight into how the Jalsas in Rabwa were held. Now, in the UK, in April 1964, Bashir Ahmed Rafiq Saab was appointed as the Imam of the Fazal Mosque in London. And we are lucky to have with us as our guest as well the eldest son of P.A. Rafiq Saab, Munir Rafiq, who is going to join Sheikh Saab as well, giving us the interesting insights into the Jalsa and its place in the UK. Is Munir, are you with us?
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Iqbal Saab. Yes, I am with you. I've been enjoying listening to the discussion up until now, yes.
Oh, well, we wanted to have you in the studio, obviously, but I know you couldn't make it for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, my sincere apologies. Bad luck. I wasn't able to actually make it. But nevertheless, I'm really pleased to be able to join the program. I know you've invited me because I'm one of those few people who was actually at the Jalsa, the very first Jalsa Salana, held in 1964, but because I was listening to, some of the very interesting comments being made by Sheikh Rahman Saab, I just wanted to add that I too had the privilege of attending a number of Jalsas in Pakistan.
Oh, excellent. Tell us your reflections as well, because, so many of us just hear things, and it'd be wonderful to hear from you.
Well, I was lucky. I attended Jalsas in 1968, and then from 1970 to 1974. And I was at that time studying in a boarding school, and during the winter months, I would come down to Rabwa and stay with my aunt. And Rabwa was, as Sheikh Rahman has rightly said, it was a very quiet, rather dusty town. it revolved around, the Jamaat and, the institutions of the Jamaat. You had Sadr Anjuman, Tariq-e-Jadid offices, Qasr Khilafat. And then in December, Rabwa would literally, it would change. It would become the hub of activity. It was just astonishing as people, from our perspective, people from not only all over Pakistan, but people from all over the world started arriving, in the sense of visitors and also our missionaries who would be coming back to Pakistan to attend Jalsa. So there would be this, great excitement, and people would line up. If there was a missionary and he was from Holland, you'd see a whole line of people lining up to shake his hands. And in those days, there was this tradition that if a missionary returned from abroad, well, literally the whole of Rabwa would, and I was personally a witness to this. The whole of Rabwa would turn up at Rabwa railway station. So as your train started to...
Munir, sorry to interject. Can you, one, of course, Rabwa would light up. But could you give us a little bit of the background of Rabwa itself, please?
I'll come to that in a second. But okay. It essentially, when everybody, the respect that was held for missionaries, the Hazrat Khalifa Thani absolutely encouraged and directed people to go to the station and welcome these missionaries who were, they were garlanded, and the whole of Rabwa would turn up to welcome them. In terms of, kind of short, abbreviated history of Rabwa, I mean, after partition, or at the time of partition, we, obviously Qadian, following the demarcation of where Qadian fell to India.
Partition 1947.
The partition 1947, and because Qadian ended up in India, the vast majority of Muslims in that area, particularly in the Punjab, they migrated to what was the new fledgling state of Pakistan. And in lieu of land that we gave up in Qadian, we were granted this land in between, people who know Pakistan, Sargoda and what was then Lailpur, but then became Faisalabad, a piece of land. And it was a barren, desolate land. There was
it was also
there.
Based on a dream, wasn't it? The second caliph also had a dream as well, in particular, for that plot of land, and therefore it was acquired, as I remember.
Indeed. I'm simply giving the historical record. Those who can explain about the dream. I mean, that in itself is a greatly inspiring story as well. But in terms of the actual movement of people, that was what happened. We left a certain number of Ahmadis in Qadian, the Darwish, who remained in Qadian. The rest then all migrated. They first settled in Lahore, which was the initial center of the Jamaat, and then slowly but surely we started to take root in Rabwa, and Rabwa began to expand, and it then became the center of the Jamaat. It shifted from Lahore, and Rabwa was then, for many years, that was the center of the Jamaat.
In fact, Munir, you've just reminded me, because when I was introducing the program to listeners, and many of the listeners obviously won't be members of the community listening across the world now, I think, with Voice of Islam, and also to mention, when I mentioned Qadian, just for them to know that Qadian was a tiny hamlet, a town in the Punjab of India as well, where the Promised Messiah, Mehdi Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, was born. And then obviously that's where he preached, that's where he started sort of really conveying the message. And so it's just important for them to know, and it built up really from a small hamlet. There was very little available in terms of connections, etc. And then from there, as you have explained, we moved to Rabwa again. a desolate place. And now, especially, if people go to see Rabwa, it's one of the best cities, I think, in Pakistan, the way it's organized and the way the Jamaat have totally transformed it as well. So Munir, just to say about your experiences then, and reflections on those early Jalsas, just paint that picture, because Sheikh Rahman really gave us a very nice sort of explanation of the whole atmosphere and the transformation. And the fact that in those days, rotis were made in tandoors. I mean, it's incredible to think now we've got these roti plants churning out thousands of rotis, and how people got together.
It was astonishing what used to happen. I mean, there was so much that the whole community would pitch in together. So you'd have in the run up to Jalsa, you'd have parali. Parali was basically hay. So every house, you would ask for hay to be delivered, and that you would spread in one particular room, and that was for guests, because virtually every single person. And I remember in my aunt's house, a room would be dedicated, and the hay straw would be spread around. And then all our relatives who would arrive from outside of Rabwa, they would, they would sleep on the floor there. So it was a very exciting time, people coming in. I remember in one Jalsa, I mean, obviously you had the inspirational speeches of our Khulafa, principally, but there were other great speakers, orators, and people literally used to rush to get to Jalsagah so that they could catch these important speeches. And I remember in following 74, in 74 we were declared non-Muslim, and I don't know whether this was deliberate or not, but about sort of 30 miles from us was the city of Sargodha, which was the Air Force headquarters. And during Jalsa, you'd have low-flying, certainly after 74, low-flying jet aircraft, which would kind of buzz the Jalsa. And it was very annoying, and it would drown out the speakers. And I remember in one year, the Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis was speaking, and this jet aircraft, it buzzed the Jalsagah. And there was at least about, I would imagine in those days, about 100,000 people in the whole Jalsagah, the arena, as it were. And at first Huzur ignored it, and then he stopped, looked up to the sky, turned to the crowd. He said, pointing up to the aircraft, he says, they want to drown out our voice. I want you to tell them and tell the world that they cannot drown out our voice. And you cannot imagine that, the entire audience erupted, Nare Takbir, and slogans. And it was literally, I mean, I was about 16 at the time. It felt like the ground was moving, because, it was 100,000 people shouting these slogans. And it was a very, very inspirational moment. I mean, I remember, the hairs on the back of your head, your neck, would stand up. It was just such an astonishing.
It must have been quite an amazing sight. Now, as I understand it, Masjid Aqsa, they had massive grounds outside it, and a lot of the jalsas were held there for these great numbers, because Munir just mentioned 100,000, and I mentioned that the last Jalsa in 83 had over 250,000. Is that the?
Yeah, that is correct.
I attended that one as well.
What did you?
By that time, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi was the.
That's right. Just been elected, yeah.
He's just been elected, so I went to attend that very first Jalsa of his Khilafat, yes. So I attended that as well.
You are a truly history man, Munir. Listen, we're going to come back to... So we were talking...
lucky, I'm blessed.
You're truly blessed. So we're going to come back to the UK now, because your father was appointed...
If I may, Munir mentioned something that I kind of wanted to just elaborate on a little bit, because I attended Pakistan Jalsa from 75 to 82, every single one of them.
Oh, wow.
And when Munir talks about the mischief that was caused, this goes back all the way to when the community got the land in Rabwa. it was sold to the community on the basis that it is barren and it will never allow the community to grow
or flourish.
Or flourish. And the fact that we are talking about 250,000 people at this land which was supposed to be barren is showing the world that how blessed this community of the Promised Messiah is.
And look at Rabwa today.
Exactly, because you mentioned the Aqsa Mosque.
It's a model city.
The Aqsa Mosque originally, when it was designed, had 4 very high minarets, which the Air Force didn't allow for the mosque to build because on the guise that they will be spreading the message and the azan, the call of prayer from this community, will be heard everywhere. So if you look at the Aqsa Mosque, the original design, which was submitted to the government for approval, had 4 minarets, but they were reduced
in size
because they wouldn't approve them.
Yeah. So, Munir, I was saying that, I mean, you're blessed in many ways because your father made such a great contribution to the Jamaat throughout the world, but in particular in Britain, in getting the UK Jamaat established. In 1964, he was appointed as the Imam he'd been the deputy before, but he was the Imam of the Muslims. And he had the vision of really bringing all the members of the UK together somehow. I know there had been various gatherings before, but the official Jalsa we consider to be the 1964 one. And I think you were, how old were you, about 9, 10?
I was, yes. I remember it distinctly.
Tell us a little bit about that historic Jalsa. And Sheikh Rahman could maybe share anything if you... No, you came in the 70s, didn't you? So, yeah. Tell us a little bit, Munir.
Dr. Iqbal loves to mention how old were you.
Old is gold. Old is gold.
Someone's older than me.
I noticed that. I noticed that.
Okay, going back.
I'm gonna.
I feel young.
For the first time. I'm going to freely admit that I am quite ancient, and I was there in 1964.
You're wearing well, though. You really are. Go on.
Well, yeah. No, I think I think it's probably useful to explain what it looked like, because the first Jalsa was held in 1964 in August. Now, I think it's useful to remember that the center of the Jamaat was, in fact, what we call 16 Crescent Hall Road, the Mahmood Hall, the Mission House, but none of that existed at that time. In fact, the address of the mission was 63 Melrose Road. So those of you who know that area, Melrose Road is the road that faces the tennis court. So that used to be the entrance. There were 2 buildings, 61 Melrose Road, 4-story buildings, 61 Melrose Road and 61 Melrose Road.
61 and 63.
61 and 63, yes.
61 and 63, yes. So 63 was the actual mission house, and 61, that was the basement and the first floor, that were for the Jamaat, and the rest had been sort of rented out to various people. When we first arrived in 1959, when my father first came, he was the Naib Imam, he was the deputy Imam, and we lived on the top floor of 61 Crescent Hall Road, Melrose Road. And it's interesting enough, below us, and this will interest Rahman as well, below us, in the flat below us, Arshad Baki Saab lived there with his brother Azhar, and the later Arshad Baki Saab, they lived below us, and then below that was Safi Shah Saab. So they rented accommodation there. Now, what happened was that after a few years, my father was appointed the Imam in 1964 in April, and he decided that, as you rightly alluded, there had been previous Jalsas, but they were Jalsas. In other words, they were one-offs. Jalsa Salana, in other words, annual Jalsas, they didn't start until 64, because then you had a Jalsa every year, and we've had a Jalsa every year since 1964, apart from 1 or 2 occasions when Jalsa couldn't be held. So when we talk about Jalsas, I think Jalsa Salanas you can safely say started in 1964, because from then on, uninterrupted, we had annual Jalsas regularly held. I think it's interesting to note that, I remember it because we moved from 61, from that small apartment, we moved into the mission house as my father became the Imam. He replaced a lovely gentleman by the name of Chaudhry Rahmat Ali. He was the Imam at the time, a wonderful man who was elderly, and he decided that he lived on his own, that it was perhaps a bit too much to live on his own, and he asked that he be.
Munir, I was just wondering, in terms of this Jalsa, I think the UK Jamaat was very fortunate that they had Chaudhry Sir Zafrullah Khan Sahab doing a major address. Do you have any memories of that? Because I found, when I read a little bit, it was very inspirational in what he said.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at that time, Chaudhry Sahab, Sir Zafrullah Khan Sahab, he was a judge at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And so, I mean, when it was decided to hold Jalsas, and the committees were formed to start organizing it, and I think it's worth remembering that my father carried out the first tajneeb of the Jamaat, and at that time there were 149 members. And that,
I was just really wanting to capture really more the. Do you remember any of that, Kayum?
No, I was. That's a lot earlier than my existence in this world. But yes, I hear a lot of stories from my father, who was
one of the inspiring things was that he pointed to the fact that, look, you are in a country which is regarded as one of the leading countries with its own belief systems, whatever. But you should consider yourself lucky being the followers of the Promised Messiah and have pride in being able to convey a message and change this country and the rest of the world as well. And I thought that was such a wonderful way of conveying the responsibility on those members who were there listening to him. Sheikh, you spent a lot of time also with Chaudhry Sahab as well, and that was the sort of person he was, wasn't he?
He was.
He was a blessing for UK, was he not?
He was. And I can relate something to him. When I was coming to the United Kingdom, I actually met him in December prior to my coming here in February. And he gave me one bit of advice, and he said, look at a fruit tree. When it bears fruit, it actually bows down. That's what you should be doing, that God has given you this opportunity. So he was teaching me a lesson in humility. And that's the message and you saw how humble he was. But Jalsa Salanas, yes, in the United Kingdom are very historical. We've grown from, Munir, the first one was held in the grounds of the Fazl Mosque.
Yeah.
Then they went to Roehampton.
Yes, indeed.
Roehampton?
That's right, yeah. Because Wandsworth...
So the first 6 Jalsas were held in the Mission House at Melrose Road, and
right.
And then the 6th Jalsa was the first Jalsa that we moved to Wandsworth Town Hall.
That's right, yeah.
So that's in 67, and Huzur attended that, because that was the first Jalsa that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis, after becoming Khalifatul Masih, the third, yes. Yes, sorry.
I recall in those days, Munir's father was the Amir, was he? Aziz Deen?
He was the national president.
Yeah, very prominent and pious person who made a lot of contributions also to the Jamaat, just to mention a few.
Aziz Deen Saab was a towering personality. He became national president some years later, but he was he was one of the backbone of the Jamaat in many ways. And I mean, they have an astonishing history, the Deen family. I mean, Aziz Deen Saab's father first came to the United Kingdom in 1910. And he was one of the individuals who, in terms of Fazl Masjid, I saw a very old photograph recently, that when they were laying the foundations of Masjid Fazl, you can see, so it's Munir Deen's and Nasir Deen's grandfather pushing a wheelbarrow. And the reason for that is that they wanted to emulate the Holy Prophet, who had helped in the construction of Masjid-e-Quba, the very first mosque in Medina after the Holy Prophet had migrated from Mecca to Medina. And so the local Ahmadis at that time, when they were laying the foundations for Masjid Fazl, decided they would themselves take part in the foundation. And there's a very interesting photograph of the Insab's father pushing a wheelbarrow as they're taking part in this laying of the foundation stone of Masjid Fazl.
I mean, there's been so many great figures, to be honest, in the history of the UK Jamaat as well, and I just wanted to mention that probably best time to have a break now, and then we'll carry on the discussions with really the build-up of the Jalsas coming to this historic Jalsa as well. So let's have a break. I don't know what happened there, but and inshallah we'll join our listeners after this short break.
Instead of embarking on an arms race leading to death and destruction, we must join the race to save and protect humanity.
And welcome back to our listeners. So just before the break, we were talking about really the foundations of the UK Jalsa Salana. And we had Munir Rafiq on the phone with us sharing really the insights into the earliest Jalsa recorded in 1964, where Imam Bir Rafiq Saab was the Imam of the UK. Later on, as I understand, Bir Rafiq Saab was appointed in Pakistan, obviously the private secretary, etc. And Sheikh Mubarak Saab took over as the Imam of the UK, Sheikh Rahman. Tell us a little bit about that period.
Well, Sheikh Saab became the missionary in charge and Amir of UK when Bashir Rafiq Saab was appointed as the private secretary to Hazrat Khalifatul Masih III. And in that period, of course, the Jalsas continued, if we're staying with the Jalsa theme.
Yeah.
But also the significant achievement of Sheikh Mubarak Saab at the time was the acquisition of 11 mission houses in the United Kingdom. So after the Fazl Mosque, which was apparently, Munir, correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently he was the man who actually had a further 11 mission houses during his tenure in the United Kingdom. And then, of course,
I think that included the Bradford mission, where
it
we
did
had
include,
a large
yes,
Jamaat as
Bradford, Birmingham, and so on and so forth.
Huddersfield and Manchester.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Jalsas continued.
Yeah.
The Jalsas had moved from the grounds of Melrose Road
that became too small, so now
to Roehampton, and then and then once a town hall and Roehampton and wherever. But of course, with limited numbers, because the UK Jamaat was still a very small Jamaat. Of course, the influx of the Ahmadis from East Africa, Uganda and Kenya, the numbers became a little bigger. But certainly the numbers really flourished when Hazrat Khalifatul Masih IV migrated to the United Kingdom.
We're going to come to that period very shortly. In fact, that sets up the scene really, whilst the community was growing throughout the world, and as you mentioned in the UK, things in Pakistan were becoming more and more difficult for the Ahmadi Muslim community. The original problem started in 74, Munir mentioned earlier on, with the declaration of the community, unfortunately, as outside the sort of world of Islam, and then under the dictator Ziaul Haq, the general who came to take over Pakistan, he introduced the infamous mandate, the Ordinance 20, which severely restricted activity of the Ahmadi Muslim community, including the banning of the annual Jalsa. And of course, it put the life and work of the Caliph in danger as well. And at that time, it was the fourth Caliph, Mirza Tahir Ahmad Rahimullah, who decided to migrate to the UK, as Sheikh Saab mentioned. So the last convention was in 1983, where we mentioned earlier on the 250,000 attendance outside Masjid Aqsa. This was a transformational moment for the UK Jamaat in particular, but the global Muslim community. What do you think?
Without a doubt, look, of course, the Pakistan government at that time tried their best to put a lid on something or Ziaul Haq as normally referred to. He wanted to kind of kill the community. And as I said, similar to all the attempts before in the history of the community, anytime somebody has tried to quash or had the notion of quashing the community, has always perished in the most worst possible way.
In disgrace.
Yes, in disgrace, and nothing different happened in this particular scenario. But I think to staying with the theme of the community. Sheikh Rahman mentioned one of the first emirs was also Mr. Kaloon, wasn't it?
And
yes,
when
yeah.
Hazrat Khalifatul Masih IV came to the United Kingdom, he appointed, almost immediately after he came here, he appointed Mr. Anwar Kano as the first emir of the United Kingdom, outside of the realm of the missionary in charge, who used to be also the Amir of the Jamaat.
So that became the separation between the Imam in charge and the Amir.
Yes, between the admin and,
Because there was a need.
There was a need, yes. And then immediately after that, within a year, Aftab Ahmad Khan Sahab was appointed as the Amir of the United Kingdom, and he lived to be the Amir until, unfortunately...
I mean, he was, for us, those of us growing up in the UK...
He was a diplomat.
He was an ambassador for Pakistan, and but a loving figure. I mean, you were very close to
towering figure.
Yeah, towering figure, really. And so let's talk about that. I mean, you will have been in London at that time.
Yes, I was.
That must have been such a history. And Munir, maybe you can come in as well. Just take us through that arrival, because we will talk about the Jalsas and all that, but I just want us to capture that moment.
I mean, the 1984 arrival of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih IV, whereas in Pakistan, the generals and everybody thought that this community is now doomed to death. It actually, I think, planted a new seed for growth, and growth globally, rather than just within the country or within
the subcontinental area.
Within the subcontinent, yes. And mashallah, I mean, we're seeing the fruits of the growth now, and we're seeing them globally. We're not just seeing them in the United Kingdom, but we're seeing them globally.
Well, yesterday the flags. The flags demonstrate exactly what Sheikh Saab is saying.
Munir, I wanted to bring you in as well at this stage. Are you still there with us?
I am indeed, yes.
Yeah, just I mean, you were a young man then. I'm not going to go into your I'm not going to go into your age, but that must have been a really historic moment. Describe to us when you heard in that first few days with Huzur's arrival.
Well, I mean, obviously there was the shock and excitement of Huzur's arrival. I mean, obviously we were following international affairs. The introduction of the ordinance was widely covered in the newspapers. Then Huzur arrived. I think, my father always used to say that the difference was that up until 1984, in fact, the Jalsa took place in 1985. Huzur arrived in April 1984, shortly after the ordinance had been enacted. His departure in itself was quite remarkable. But I think up until then, the Jamaat had been expanding kind of organically. And yet, when Huzur arrived, and this is the blessings of Khilafat, the Jamaat expanded, and there was a new zeal within the Jamaat and Jamaat members. It kind of revolutionized the Jamaat. People felt that this, there was a buzz that something was remarkable was happening. I mean, Huzur himself was a remarkable, dynamic individual. And if his majlis-e-irfans in which he would, that was something revolutionary, because we'd never seen that in the UK, where you'd, after Maghrib prayers, he would remain in the mosque, and anybody could simply stand up and ask him any question about any subject, and he would answer, whether it was about politics, Islam, or a history of Ahmadiyyat, or anything.
I mean, his Khilafat Madinah was a true blessing for us all in the UK and throughout the world as well. But as I recall, when he came in 84, the first, later on we acquired Islamabad, and we'll go into that briefly, and the big Jalsas in 85, where we got soaked and covered with mud, which was a beautifully...
I think
tell us through the 84 Jalsa.
I think in 84, one thing I think Munir and Sheikh Rahman also referred to it. it was the first time people in the United Kingdom, look, when you hear of persecution in other countries, you have a feeling, you think, okay, and you try to kind of get an idea that, and you pray, but with the sudden arrival of His Holiness at that time, it was the first time people saw and felt, because in the first annual gathering in 1984, when His Holiness was giving his concluding address, the pain, the tears of His Holiness truly woke the community up, in a sense, and gave them a true essence of the persecution that was being felt.
And also the first address that he made in Mahmud Hall.
That's right.
Upon his arrival.
Exactly. And
so charged.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes, the tears of the Caliph at that time and throughout the 80s at all the annual conferences. I will never forget. It's those things
But the 85 Jalsa, keeping to that, the first Jalsa, when Islamabad was acquired.
That's right.
I was Qaid London then. And Anwar Khan Sahab tasked us that we should go and clean up Islamabad. The grass was taller than us. The bushes were taller than us. We had to clean the whole site. We had to paint every dormitory. And mashallah, the Khuddam at that time,
I remember those.
I tell you, exemplary.
Thank you.
They would spend hours and hours. And the inspiration came from Hazrat Khalifatul Masih IV.
Yes.
It came from him. And the 85 Jalsa, if all of us recall that, rain, it was held in April, snow, all the cars getting stuck in the grounds. Despite the fact that we ordered extra hay to be brought in, we still had cars stuck there. It was amazing. And everybody was truly charged and blessed.
Definitely. And throughout the years that you have mentioned, you're correct. I mean, the vast improvements to the arrangements and the facilities and the infrastructure, it got to a point where Islamabad became too small for the growing community.
Just to cover the numbers for listeners, because when we initially started the Jalsas around Islamabad was Tilford, Surrey, you had something like numbers really going up to 5,000. Yes. Moving on over time to about 11, 12,000 onwards. But then, as you said, Kayo, Islamabad, so that was 25 acres or so, that site.
Yes. That's right.
And it was some wonderful experiences, as you mentioned there, with all the Vakariyamas and everything. And really, Hazur, how much interest in took it. But the site became too small. And of course, I think he'd indicated also we needed a bigger, but the present Hazur, when he became the Khalifa, he made it absolutely clear that, look, there's no way we can carry on. You need a bigger site. And that's what Hadikatul Mahdi was acquired. Which year was it?
2006, under the guidance of His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah strengthen his hand. Under his guidance,
every Khilafat has such acres. Blessings associated with
this huge place where we can accommodate. And again, to be honest, we're in 2022, and this place of 208 acres has become too small.
When
it's that, which shows exactly what you're saying, Dr. That the progression of the Jamaat. All these people over years who tried to think that we're going to shut these people down.
And remember, the most important thing that happened to the United Kingdom, for which we are very blessed, frankly, is the fact that the presence of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih in the United Kingdom makes it your international, gives you that international status, which obviously we are
so
blessed and we cannot thank God enough for that to happen to us in this country.
I think the way also this country has really accommodated Khilafat and supported the community and understood the persecution that's going on, it's really something to be greatly appreciated. And also the way the community itself has worked to build bridges and to have the sort of outreach work. We're probably coming towards the end of our program. Let's do a quick little review of how such a big event. Yesterday I was sitting in the marquee, and honestly, I don't think there's hardly any organization in the world can do something as large and as magnificent as this. I know that might be boasting, but people have to come and see it for themselves, what goes on. So,
Dr. you mentioned progression, and we were just talking about, and His Holiness has already said it. His Holiness mentioned that we need to start preparing this site for 50,000 attendees.
Right.
And we know, we experience, and I'm sure our listeners, can kind of find out that over time, as we said, the first ever annual convention had 75 people, which grew to 250,000 in the subcontinent.
Yeah.
And here in UK, we talked about, small numbers, and now His Holiness has said 50,000. And I can assure you, history will show us it happens. We will be ready, and by the time we get for 50, we'll be told 100, and so on and so forth.
Inshallah.
When you think of what the Pakistanis thought to themselves, what they do to the community, and what we see now. With Khilafat coming to the UK, we had MTA International, and look how MTA International now conveys the Jamaat, the Jalsas, and everything that goes on throughout the world. It's just an amazing thing to see.
Well, Pew Research a few years ago they do statistics, and they said the Ahmadi Muslim community is the fastest growing Islamic community in the world.
Absolutely. And now, by the grace of Allah, you got Voice of Islam Radio as well now.
Yeah.
That is now spreading throughout the world in so many different countries, and again, it's becoming a prominent voice for Islam.
Outreach.
It's just absolutely...
MTA, Muslim Television Ahmadiyya, you name it. You name the platform, we're there.
And then the humanitarian organization like Humanity First, and so the Engineers Association, the work we're doing in Africa and across the world as well. So just to...
if I may, just quickly, and plus in today's day and age, one thing the world is needing is a leader, and we have one selfless leader who is truly giving the world and politicians in all walks of life that guidance to talk about peace, harmony and justice.
Absolutely.
Just to give listeners a little appreciation of how something as massive as this and what was done in Pakistan is organized. The community has a whole structure for Jalsa Salana, and just to give them an understanding, it's split up into 3 major segments. One we called the Jalsa Gah organizing committee. What goes on inside the marquee, the program, all the logistics that go on, and you have specific head running that one. Another group is what we call Khidmat-e-Khalq, the service really of humanity or people, whatever needs, whether they need water, cleanliness, or whatever. And there's a whole head and structure that goes there as well. And then there's the overall picture, the officer, the Jalsa Salana officer who oversees everything, planning from a year ahead and all that. And when you see some of these people, these are full-time people who've got their professions. They're working, they might be dentists, engineers, in all sorts of different backgrounds. And really our respect goes out to...
selfless workers.
Or selfless workers.
And we understand that there are 2,000 volunteers on site, day in and day out.
Absolutely.
Working to make this, and these are volunteers.
No. And then, you mentioned, we started off with the inspiration really, and the purpose behind the Jalsa, and in the words of the promised Messiah Mahdi himself. And honestly, it is so wonderful to hear some of those inspirational speeches. Whether it's about, the core responsibilities of a family, the crisis across the world and what our role is as a community, the whole success story of spread and the report that the Khalifa gives to the whole community. It's just absolutely amazing, really, and we are so fortunate. And then, for the last 3 years, we've been watching it on MTA because of the COVID restrictions. And I know for myself personally, Sheikh Sabir, you can't express the feeling of brotherhood when you meet friends from so...
Actually, it does illustrate the words of the promised Messiah that he narrated on the first Jalsa. This Jalsa actually proves every word that he said, that spirit of brotherhood, meeting each other, being respectful to each other, eating together, and so many other activities that happen, spiritual, raising your spiritual levels. Amazing.
It's a fantastic recharging. The world is moving towards these battery operated cars and everything electronic. This is the spiritual recharging which we get when we get together at such things. So listen, it's been absolutely wonderful to have you, Sheikh Rahman.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution as well. And
thank you for your invite.
Super. And Zawar and the
Munir
team as well, and Munir Rafiq, of course, sitting in London and on the phone as well. Greatly appreciated with his contribution. Our technical team, everybody who's put this program together. Hope listeners have found it useful, informative, but certainly enjoyed talking to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saab, for giving us the opportunity.
Until the next Jalsa, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.